I guess I got to switch my mic on first. There we go. So my name is Brian. I'm one of the youth guys here, and Dave had a baby, so I get to speak to you guys today. I'm really excited about it. My girlfriend and I recently rediscovered something called Groupon. It's some of you are laughing. There's some Mennonites in the room. It's a website that offers discounted rates for experiences and items if a certain number of people buy it. So group coupon. Think of those two words together. So a business can offer a really good deal and be sure they're going to make a smaller profit off a larger number of people. So a while ago, Megan, my girlfriend, saw a Groupon or a promotion for a restaurant called Dark Table. Some of you guys might know what that is. It's a restaurant in Vancouver, and she decided we need to give it a go. So we checked it out this week. For those of you who don't know what Dark Table is, it's a restaurant that's as much about the experience of going as the food that you eat there. Probably actually even more about the experience. You come to the door, and they take your order outside, and a nice blind man named Alberto meets you in the front entryway, and there's kind of these double doors. So you walk in the first set, and then there's a dim light, and then he explains to you that after this point, you won't be able to see. He's going to lead you to your table, and if you need anything, you just have to yell for Alberto, and he'll come and help you. So if you need to go to the bathroom, Alberto, and then he'll come and help you. He'll lead you to the bathroom, and you'll do that yourself, but he'll help you with that. He walked us over to our table. As some toilet humor, sorry. He walked us over to our table, and he helped us get seated. And when we sat down, I could tell that there was a couple off to my right somewhere, maybe across the aisle from us, and there was a wall to my left. I'm going to do this lots as I'm talking about this, because this was my left wall, and then kind of there. And I actually have a picture of what it looked like here. So, Josh, can we put that picture up? Yeah, here we go. So this is from my perspective, and as you can see from this photo, Megan is sitting, it's a little confusing, but I'll talk you through it. Megan's sitting right across from me, and then you can see there's a wall on my left, and then the couple, you can just see them, they're kind of on my right. That was some cheap humor. I couldn't see anything. I was completely blind, and we were in total darkness. There was this lady that was a little ways away from me. Her watch kept turning on, but that was otherwise complete darkness. And the rest of the time we were there, we began to adjust and to figure out how to do life without sight. To find my cup of water, this is that wall action I was talking about, I would put my hand on the wall, and then I would kind of slide my hand forward slowly until I found my water. And when I was eating, I used both my knife and my fork, because I'm not an animal. And I would use the front edge of my plate as kind of a guide, and then I would, so I didn't spill on myself, right? So I'd kind of slide forward. And we sort of started creating habits and rules in order to be able to function in the dark. Stuff that I would never do otherwise, right? I would drink my water, and then I was doing this to put it down, like I'd pat the tablecloth, or I was holding my face over my plate like a 14-year-old boy eats cereal. Like I was just kind of right over my plate. I started doing a bunch of things that I wouldn't do if I couldn't see, right? And I could get away with them because we were in the dark. I wasn't blind, but the reality was I was blinded, right? I couldn't see what was right in front of me. So why did I just tell you about my date night this week? Well, it's funny, and also it'll make sense, I promise. So this is the week, South Langley. This is the week that John comes to its, I'll use the word crux. I think that's the right word. We've been in this series for almost a year, but everything up to this point is just the introduction, laying the foundation for what's to come. In this passage that we're looking at today, Jesus' public ministry concludes, and the inciting incident that we're going to look at in a second kicks off God's timetable, or maybe makes it more clear to us what God's timetable is. And from here on, the book of John takes a turn, and Jesus holds nothing back after this point. At the very beginning of this passage, we get this interesting discourse followed by a statement from Jesus that the whole book hinges on. We hear about a group of Greeks, or outsiders of the Jewish faith, Gentiles, coming to see Philip, asking to meet Jesus, or to see Jesus. They're asking to see Jesus. Philip grabs his buddy Andrew, and I'm not sure why. Maybe he's a little nervous to go to Jesus alone. I don't know. Maybe they were just hanging out. The text tells us he grabs his buddy Andrew, and together they go to tell Jesus about it. And you can just kind of picture them saying to Jesus, "Hey, Jesus, I know you've been meeting with mostly Jewish people, but I got these friends. and they're Greeks, but they want to see you. And what Jesus says to them, I don't think they could have predicted. They wouldn't have seen this coming. Jesus says 5 words. He responds with 5 words that completely change the game. They're behind me. Now the time has come. Why does this matter? Well, you see, in the book of John, you might remember, you're thinking back to almost a year ago, in John 2, up to this point, John has made it very clear that Jesus' time had not yet come up to this point. In John 2, verse 4, when he's at the wedding, Mary comes to him and says, hey, Jesus, you got to help these people out. And Jesus says, my time hasn't come yet. Later on in John 7, Jesus is preaching openly in the synagogue or in the temple. And nobody, it says in the text, nobody arrested Jesus. And then it says, because his time had not yet come. So what changes now? Because something has changed. Jesus just said that it changed. Well, Greeks want to see Jesus. The outside world is knocking at the door. And what the Jewish leaders failed to see, the Gentiles wished to see. What the Jewish leaders failed to see, the Gentiles wished that they could see. As I was kind of writing this, my mind was running to Narnia, and probably just because I watched it before Christmas, but it's a great movie. I hope he writes another, I'm just kidding. I know that they're books. My mind runs to Narnia, and if you've read those books, Peter and Susan and Lucy meeting Aslan, right? Just like Peter and Susie and Lucy coming to see Aslan, the Gentiles are coming to see Jesus, and it's a sign of something changing. Spring is coming. It's the first sign of spring. Church, are we looking for Jesus? Hey, that was great timing, Zasha. That's awesome. Are we looking for Jesus? With that statement, the time has come. Jesus' ministry concludes. And we actually don't know if he meets with them. It's kind of funny. Jesus kind of just changes. He launches off into a lesson on agriculture. And although this isn't where we're going to camp out today, I think it's important to mention a few things here. So let's read this together. John 12, 24 to 26, if you have your Bibles. It'll be on the slides behind me as well. I tell you the truth. Unless a kernel of wheat is planted in the soil and dies, it remains alone. But its death will produce many new kernels, a plentiful harvest of new lives. Those who love their life in this world will lose it. Those who care nothing for their life in this world will keep it for eternity. Anyone who wants to serve me must follow me, because my servants must be where I am. And the Father will honor anyone who serves me. In continuing with this theme of spring, or the time coming, Jesus starts making reference to himself being a seed that is planted, bringing new life. The greatest honor a seed can have is being buried in the ground and dying. That's kind of a crazy thing to me. It's not like being eaten or something like it's being buried and dying to produce new life. If we really want to see Jesus and understand what he's about, we need to be ready to be planted in the same way, to give up our lives as he did. Following Christ entails self-sacrifice, shown most fully through the cross. It means that often we have to give up our right to be treated fairly. And I'm not talking, we're going to remove abuse from that because that's completely different. But sometimes we need to give up our right to be treated fairly. The things that we think we're entitled to, we need to give those things up. It's kind of this Philippians 2 kind of thing, right? I really love Philippians 2. I'm just going to paraphrase it, and I'm not going to put it on the slides behind me, but you should check it out. Paul says this. He's talking to the church in Philippi, and he says, have this mind among yourselves. He says, be like Jesus, whose example was so extreme that he died so that we could have new life. And after Jesus says this bit to his disciples, we see a glimpse of Jesus that we don't get very often. My Bible says that he was deeply troubled when he was thinking about his death. I have this quote from N.T. Wright, and I really like this. I think it kind of helps put this into perspective. This word troubled. N.T. Wright says this. He says, "Troubled, yes, the Word that had become flesh, the one in whom the Father's own love and power was truly seen, the one who healed the sick, turned water into wine, opened blind eyes, and raised Lazarus to life. He was troubled, deeply troubled right down to his heart." Is your picture of God big enough to include a vulnerable Jesus? Are we looking for a vulnerable Jesus? Something to think about, I think. A little while after this, Jesus takes a turn and he begins to talk about light. And John follows it up with a statement about Israel's unbelief. But let's read that together. Verse 35, Jesus replies, "My light will shine with you just a little while longer. Walk in the light while you can, so the darkness will not overtake you. Those who walk in the darkness cannot see where they are going. Put your trust in the light while there is still time, and then you will become children of the light." After saying these things, Jesus went away and was hidden from them. As Megan and I spent more time at Dark Table, we began to become more and more comfortable with our situation. It's amazing, you know. Alberto was taking care of us. We had figured out where the things that we needed to access were. And although we didn't completely forget what sight was like, what being in the light was like, we started to become more comfortable without it. Stumbling around in the dark and beginning to figure out how to do things, we become comfortable and we become safe and forget that there's a time coming when light will return. And the light is actually better. Nice. The light is actually better. Throughout the book of John, we see that Jesus, as the light, replaces law. John loves to do this throughout the book. He's replacing Jewish law with Jesus throughout the book. And this actually makes a little bit of sense if we're just thinking about it from like a, top-down view or whatever. It's in the light that we can see, right? Light illuminates things that are hidden away, and it's hard to hide in a well-lit room, well-lit space. When we were in the darkness, we were relying on Alberto and very tangible things to guide us. I think this is the way the world works most of the time. We seek advice, and we're told what to do and how to function, what we need to purchase in order to get by. We're told the order that we need to live our lives in. We're seen as more or less valuable based on what we have done or what we own or what we contribute to the world. And when we own things, like tangible, real things, then we're successful. There are markers while we're stumbling around in the dark. Are you content with stumbling around in the dark, making your own rules, and trying to make yourself comfortable? Or are you longing for the day when you can see Jesus and walk in the light? Are you looking for him? As Christians, we long for a day when the light will return. The hardest part is that we live in this already, not yet time, right? Jesus has established his kingdom. The light has come and it's defeated the darkness, and we're kind of in the middle, right? The passage we just read was talking about the judgment coming, but we're kind of in this middle saved space. Throughout his gospel, John has been telling us the story of new creation, of Jesus redeeming creation. And the signs have been building up. I'm just going to go through them just to remind you guys. Water into wine in chapter 2. The nobleman's son in chapter 4. The healing of the cripple in chapter 5. The bread in the desert in chapter 6. The man born blind in chapter 9. And most recently, the raising of Lazarus in chapter 11. And John also mentions that Jesus performed countless other signs as well. These 6 are just the tip of the iceberg, and yet everyone went on with their own conversations. He had done these things, but they still didn't believe. For all you parents in the room, we sort of get this picture of ungrateful children. You prepare meals, do the laundry, clean the house, pay for everything. The list goes on. And often it completely goes unnoticed. Life goes on. Your kids come home from school. They don't notice anything. But beyond that, they leave muddy footprints on the floor. They complain about the food, leave things all over the place, right? I'm not going to pretend to understand fully what that's like, but I do understand like 1% of what that's like living with my roommates. I love my roommates. I'm going to say that right now. One of them in particular is a little bit of a mama's boy. His mom loves him very much. And often he leaves things half undone. Half undone? I guess it's the same thing. He often leaves things half done, which is actually better than completely undone most of the time. Over Christmas, he was gone for a little while. Anyways, over Christmas, he was gone for a few days, and I got home late from a family gathering one night, and I knew instantly that he had come back because of this. So you can put that photo up. So this is, I don't know if you can see what's happening here. It's a photo of our toilet. Yeah, the bathroom might be a little bit messy, but the toilet paper roll made it out of the extra thing, but not on there. So it's half done. Anyways, that's just an example. In my mind, it's harder to hold it, and I don't know, it just seems like more work. But anyways, before I finish this story, that's like a little bit of a tangent, but before I finish the story, I feel the need to clarify that I do love my roommates, and I love living with them. A few days before Christmas, I spent the better portion of my Saturday putting up some new decorations because we had discussed turning our suite into more of a home. It makes a difference, right? Some floating shelves, maybe a plant, anyways. Put some things up. I cleaned the bathroom, the kitchen, I vacuumed, I cleaned the floors, I washed their towels as well. Did all the laundry. I know it was big, cost me like $1.50. And when my roommate got home, one in particular, just everything went unnoticed, right? Life went on as normal. I'm not sure what I was expecting. I don't know. I actually don't know what I was expecting. Maybe just like I noticed or like some sort of acknowledgement, but nothing. And that's, we'll dive back into the text here. In John 12:37, I think that's like a 0.01% of what's going on here, maybe significantly less. But despite all the miraculous signs Jesus had done, most of the people still did not believe in him. This is exactly what Isaiah the prophet had predicted. Lord, who has believed our message? To whom has the Lord revealed his powerful arm? But the people couldn't believe, for as Isaiah also said, the Lord has blinded their eyes and hardened their hearts, so that their eyes cannot see and their hearts cannot understand, and they cannot turn to me and have me heal them. Isaiah was referring to Jesus when he said this because he saw the future and spoke of the Messiah's glory. Many people did believe in him, however, including some of the Jewish leaders, but they wouldn't admit it for fear that the Pharisees would expel them from the synagogue, for they loved human praise more than the praise of God. As John tells the story of Jesus' spectacular achievements and the people's remarkable lack of interest, he goes back to a couple of Old Testament stories. You can imagine him just thinking about this. Moses in Egypt, who did a whole bunch of signs in front of Pharaoh, and Pharaoh couldn't believe. Amazing, right? Like, I just don't understand that. Pharaoh saw these things and could not believe. His heart was hardened. His eyes were blinded. And in Isaiah chapter 6, it might almost be worse, we hear an even more extreme example. The Israelites themselves were so deep in their sin and rebellion that not only were they not seeing the signs, they were actively resisting him. The only course for God now was judgment, even though, as Isaiah saw, through that judgment, an extraordinary work of salvation would emerge. It's Jesus later on. Now, John, he's looking at the Judeans, he's looking at the Jews, and they see Jesus' signs, and the only explanation John can find is for their failure to believe is that they must have been blinded. They must be simply hard-hearted. In John 12:40, as we just read, he's quoting Isaiah. He says, he has blinded their eyes and hardened their hearts. Right? They went on with their own conversations, or they criticized, even worse. Even those who were soft-hearted, who really did believe that Jesus was the Messiah, didn't say so because of fear. They were concerned about what people would say about them, more than about what God thought about them. I almost can't understand that piece more. You know that Jesus is the Messiah, but you're scared? I don't know. But John is clear that this new creation, this recreation, is going to indeed go ahead in Jesus. These 6 signs, these 6 miracles we just talked about, that we've been talking about for a year, we're leading rapidly to a 7th. And the moment when the themes in the gospel would come together and leave history stamped with the image of a dying man on a cross. Lifted up for the world to see, opening blind eyes and softening hard hearts. I will open the eyes of my heart, Lord. With the love of God. Death itself was going to do its worst, and suddenly God would give freedom to the whole world. So where does that leave us? I had a professor in school who loved to ask the question, if Jesus came back today instead of 2,000 years ago, so we're just going to enter into a hypothetical space for a second, would we recognize him? If he came today instead of 2,000 years ago, would we recognize him? And the more I think about it, the more I think the answer might be no. Would we just go on with our conversations? Would we complain that we wish he would have done something else instead? Would we say that we probably believe, but would rather people didn't know? Yeah, these are the questions that the text is addressing. Now let's come back to today, our reality today. Have we allowed ourselves to become blind? Sometimes I think so. Maybe church is comfortable and safe for us, and when we sing and listen and give money, it feels good, but maybe in doing those things, we've lost the why and simply learned to be comfortable in the darkness. We like church the way it is, the size it is, the people that are here, the songs that we sing. It's safe and it's comfortable. Are we looking for Jesus? Where do we start? When we came to the end of our meal at Dark Table, I stood up and I crashed into the table next to us. I couldn't see it, that was part of the reason, but also it was so close to us that during my meal, I could have reached out like this and touched the guy's face next to me. There was about 1.5 feet between me and the guy next to me, and luckily the people that were sitting there had left a little while earlier. But during the meal, if I was more aware of my surroundings, I could have touched him. That's like crazy. It seemed like he was so far away. We were that close. I was too wrapped up in my own insecurity and figuring out my own comfort to realize the world beyond myself. And maybe you're there with me, wrapped up in doing the things that keep us comfortable, so wrapped up that we miss the people around us. If that's us, then how are we ever supposed to be the church? To tell them about Jesus, to love them, if we don't even see them to begin with? We believe in a light, Jesus, that illuminates darkness, breaks down walls, calls us out of comfort, out of our boats, out of our ways of doing things for ourselves and into his way, a way which is simple to say, but is actually harder to live out. Living by rules is easy. We know what to do and when, what not to do, how often to do things. But living in the light and following Jesus isn't actually about following rules to make the darkness work. It's about bringing his way of doing things, the light, into everything that we do. The way we do business, the way that we serve, where we serve, the way that we treat the people around us, the way that we view ourselves, the way that we treat creation, our relationship with God, the kind of parents we are. Jesus takes this so far that he takes on death on our behalf and calls us to do the same. I think that's pretty crazy. And hopefully we aren't literally going to die on crosses, but following him means that we move out of ourselves into a life that's way beyond our comfort. It's moving out of the restaurant and into the world outside. If we want to see Jesus, then that's where you'll find him. I'm going to call the band back up. And just before I wrap up, I just want to add, if you've been living in the darkness, making your own way, living by your own rules, and it's starting to feel like there really isn't hope, going back to my Dark Table experience, when Megan and I were there, what made it fun was our hope that light would return. And likewise, as followers of Jesus, our hope is in the light returning, right? The light is better. I just want to end with this. Jesus says this in verse 46, "I have come as a light to shine in this dark world, so that all who put their trust in me will no longer remain in the dark." Thanks.